Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm Naresh with Adam Schrader. We thank all of our homies, homegirls, homeboys, home trans, all the work from homers out there for tuning in to us. Today we have an awesome interview with Cynthia Spraggs. She is the CEO of Virtira, a company that helps remote teams perform better, and best-selling author of How to Work From Home and Actually Get Shit Done. 50 tips for leaders and professionals to work remotely and outperform the office. Cynthia, welcome to the Work From Home Show.
Thanks, Naresh. Very happy to be here.
Let's first start with, is it Virtira or Virtira?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Virtira, however you say it. Yeah, we've been doing remote, really large distributed terms in large tech companies. So we've been doing that for over a decade. And that's really where our specialty is making teams perform better.
Got it. So can you give just some examples of the types of services you offer and the work that you do at Virtira?
Sure. So if, let's say you are a global IT company and you are rolling out, you've got something that worked in Europe and you want to roll it out to other segments of the world. So you'd have a large cross-functional team, some of them working office to office, but a lot of them working from home. So there's a lot of work that is required to make all those people functional and work together. Often the individuals are reporting to different managers in different locations. So you somehow have to it's almost like wrangling cats, honestly. You have to be able to take all those people, find out what everybody has to do and get it all done on time and on budget. So that's a lot of our work is around that, but our entire company is also virtual. So we've had to adapt a lot of the day-to-day in-office procedures and management to making ourselves work. And we have clients that we also do that for as well.
So what are some of the big issues that you see companies having to deal with whenever they start building up their remote teams and trying to get them as functional, if not more functional than they were whenever they were, face-to-face?
I think one of the biggest issues we've seen, and of course we've seen a lot more of it this year than other years, is they try to manage remote and virtual teams, whether they're at home or whether they're on the road or whatever. They try to manage them using traditional management techniques. And a lot of those techniques were built for intact teams in the same office, who could, you could knock on their door, you could get an answer. And so we found even project management, team management, even how the assumptions on how people collaborate and communicate, what works in an office just does not work virtually. And it can be quite painful seeing employers try to make that transition.
As far as working virtually efficiently goes, in your book, How to Work From Home and Actually Get Shit Done, you share tips for leaders and professionals to work remotely and to have even better productivity than at the office. So what are your secrets for working virtually and being more productive?
So I think that there's numerous things that impact how productive you're going to be. I think what we've seen a lot of this year is employers focusing on team engagement, but we've seen the explosion in Zoom calls, pizza parties, that kind of thing. And I haven't really seen a lot of focus on making those individuals more productive. So varying from how you set up your home office, which is, you can find a lot of articles on that online. What we're finding is one of the biggest problems is the amount of interruptions and distractions that happen to home-based employees during the day. So even things as basic as how to mute yourself on a meeting, how many hours are spent every day because somebody does not know how to, switch off their microphone. Maybe they've got a doorbell ringing, they just don't know how to do it. So we're seeing a lot of drop in productivity simply from not knowing the basic tools of the trade, so to speak. Obviously, video meeting platforms, the collaboration platforms, you just have to be more succinct in your communications, and you really, really have to know your tools inside out.
As we move towards this more remote team, are you seeing that it's kind of an opportunity at all for younger people to step up into leadership roles because they work better virtually and they know the technology better? Or is it still kind of saying that, the elder statesmen are good managers and able to adapt to the new situation?
I don't know if it has anything to do with age. I mean, I've been working remotely for 25 years with some of the big tech companies, and I think that there is still a high correlation between having to be co-located with your management and career progression. So I think before anybody, people have to realize what they want. Do you want to have work-life balance? Is your work going to be funding a great life where you're going to travel around the world and, do all kinds of things that you want to do? Or are you on a career track to become a vice president? Do you want to be a president of a company? There's two very, very different decisions there. And if you want to do the career track, it's great. If everybody is virtual, fine. You're all on the same playing field. But if your manager or your senior management are in the office, you're going to have to be there. You can't be at home 100% of the time and expect to have an equal playing field with people who are with that manager every day at the office. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to have a physical office, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what we're seeing in terms of a lot of studies right now and what's work going to look like after the pandemic, we're seeing companies going to sort of a 2-day in, 3-day off, like partly home, part office. I don't disagree with that model because I think it might be a nice transition. But what I do think is going to be a problem is if you have an intact team of employees and at any time half of them are at home and the other half are at the office, I think that the collaboration and communication issues are going to be extreme. I really do. I think that rather than you put a sticky note on somebody's cubicle or the desk or whatever you do, it's just not. It's going to be very, very difficult for employees to make that switch. I think what would be easier if you had an entire department move home. So let's say that the leasing department doesn't have to be at the office. Let's just say the employer
send the
wants
accountants
to
home.
Yeah, exactly. Send all the accountants home, send all the finance people. I think that would work a lot better because everybody, again, you've got to communicate virtually or you've got to communicate in the office. I think the hybrid, where it's half the team at home and half the team at the office at any particular day, I don't think that's a model that's going to work. And unfortunately, I think it's going to be blamed on the remote work side, not the fact that the tools and collaboration aren't set up properly.
Cynthia, as far as meetings go, we haven't touched on the idea and concept of virtual meetings. What are your best tips to run and have productive virtual meetings and webinars? Sure.
So, well, webinars and meetings are two different subjects. So I'll talk about meetings first. What was amazing to me, and actually one of the reasons I wrote the book was I saw the explosion of Zoom calls. And we saw all of these people all of a sudden being mandated to be on camera all day long. It was crazy. I mean, when I heard people having to eat lunch on camera because somebody thought that would make them a more engaged team, I thought, I've got to do something. So number one is in terms of meetings, you have to be far more efficient. If you're inviting a bunch of people to a meeting, does everybody really have to be at the call when the call happens? Could they not listen to the recording or listen to the meeting notes? If somebody doesn't have to make a decision during that meeting, I would say they don't have to be physically or dialing in at that time. The other thing I really don't agree with is that everybody has to be on webcam all the time. If you are and again, there's some studies being done on this right now, but if you're an introvert, having a webcam and having all these bobbing heads and all these webcams and people on camera in front of you is extraordinarily distracting. It's very difficult to think. It's just another sensory overload or sensory input. And I think that in terms of productivity, I don't think having the camera on for every single call is necessary. I think that people are confusing engagement, team engagement, people seeing each other with productivity, and I think that's a big problem. I mean, obviously, you've got to do things like have an agenda. You've got to have you've got to have somebody who can keep the meeting on track. You've got to find out all your action items. You've got to follow up after, make sure everybody is doing action items. Siemens did a study back in 2012, and I'm sure it's even worse today. And they found that 75% of people on a call, on a virtual meeting, were not paying attention. So you can imagine now with all the distractions that people have. So you've got to manage around that. And again, so anyway, that's the meeting side. On the webinar side, I think it's a lot easier. I think that you are in presentation mode. If you're speaking, of course, you can be on camera. You have a particular, you have a script you can go from. So you're not really interacting with your audience as much. It's sort of a one-way communication that you could pre-record, or you could make the recording available later. So I think there's two completely different ideas here.
Yeah, I think kind of the whole video has to be on. It's kind of like having to show your face in the office, that just because you're there doesn't mean you're productive. I definitely agree with that. When it comes to kind of after the vaccine and after, kids can go back to school full time, how do you envision people starting to like remote working more whenever they can just work from home and not have to work and parent and do everything else at the same time from home? I kind of think that there's going to be people are going to realize, oh, this is better than I thought it is, because now I don't have to deal with all the other stuff going on.
I do. I really do think that obviously everybody's surveying everybody right now, and there's a big survey out of I think it was the National Statistics Bureau or something, and because they're wondering how many people are going to be migrating to work remotely, and of the estimated 50% of the population is home right now because of the pandemic, and of those, about 37% would love to continue being at home. And that's not those are people that used to commute to the office every day. So a lot of people are finding that even with kids and all the distractions and, spouses and bandwidth issues, even now people are finding it a lot more productive to be at home. You can imagine once you can get a better working relationship with your better half, once that's done, and once the kids are back in school and you've got a lot less distraction, you can imagine how much more productive people can be. I haven't worked in an office for so many years, and I do think that productivity is increased. You don't have your hour commute. You don't have to get ready in the morning. You don't have to worry about, putting your dog in doggy daycare. You don't have to chat to people if you don't want to. I always found office work extraordinarily unproductive, and it's one of the reasons why I went to home-based work in the first place.
As far as emails go, you talk a little bit in your book how to work from home and actually get shit done. I believe you said emails are somewhat overrated. Can you expand on that?
Yeah. So with all of the tools that we have available to us right now, the least effective form of communication, possibly besides a voicemail, which I think is the worst thing in the world, It's email.
People who leave me a voicemail don't like me.
Well, they also probably don't get a response. I think I probably get 10 on my phone right now that I haven't checked. So an email, here's the problem with an email. If you send it, you can't take it back, even if you retrieve it. What you put in writing, if you're having a bad day, it could be quite expensive legally if you say something bad about somebody and it gets posted or something like that. The great thing about the collaboration systems that we have available, like Slack or MS Teams or WebEx Teams or whatever you want to use, is that it's the closest thing you're going to get to a back and forth conversation without having to use your voice. And also, if you can also delete your messages so that if you do inadvertently say something you shouldn't, those can be erased from your system, depending on the employer. I find emails, I just find that they're inefficient. I mean, you've got to dig through them. If you get up I know I've got one employee who works and he's about 4 hours behind. And I think if I was to send him as many emails that I did messages, he'd probably wake up with 40 messages every morning, where, it's just so much more efficient to use the collaboration systems, to use text and that we have available. I think email was great when it was invented, but I think it's kind of had its day. And I think there's a lot better ways to communicate now. Can
you go over some of the tools? I mean, you mentioned Slack, but what are some of the big things you're seeing companies using that are helping their remote teams?
So the big thing we're using, I guess the large companies that we're dealing with. So obviously, everybody has something like, as I said, Microsoft Teams, WebEx Teams, Slack, Google, whatever platform you happen to be using. The other thing a lot of companies are taking advantage of are tools, online planning tools. So right now we're using Miro, but I know there's a lot of there's other options for that, where you can collaboratively get on a call and use sticky notes and do whiteboarding exercises and things like that. Another big one is dashboards. So whether you use a tool like Confluence or you use something like Smartsheets, there are a lot of really nice dashboards so that we're suggesting our clients, so everybody's setting up their own team page for a department. And you can do this even if you're a single proprietor, right? You can set up it's a lot easier to maintain than, it's not like a website. It's a place where if you want to put links to everything, it's just a lot easier to communicate. We put, if we run a project, we'll have a separate project page. We run Smartsheets or some kind of collaborative project planning tool into it. And people can update it remotely. They can work on it anytime they want. So it just gives you, particularly now, when the workday is sort of segmented, when you've got to worry about your children and other, 9 to 5 probably is not going to be a typical workday right now. It just allows people to flexibly work and collaborate without needing to particularly be in the same time zone or at work at the same time. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but online dashboards, the ability to add agenda items to a meeting. We've got, I think almost, it's very seldom we would go back and forth by email and to try and figure out what do you want to add to the next meeting. The only other tool I would say that really helps us a lot is online calendaring, external calendaring tools. So if you, rather than, again, the email back and forth, do you want to meet at 2? Do you want to meet at 1? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? It just makes your life so much easier by being able to have blocks of time where people can book time with you. It's all about saving time and being more productive, really.
Yeah, Naresh and I have talked on the show before about how, in terms of work hours, I know personally, my work hours are way outside of the 9 to 5 range. But you mentioned the percentage of people working from home now. Do you have any idea of any percentages that may come up kind of after things go back to whatever normal are, kind of what percentage of people will still be working from home?
In terms of percentages working from home, it really it's going to depend on the employers, and it's going to depend on how well they set up. And I'm not talking about entrepreneurs or small businesses. I'm talking about the knowledge workers who are migrating right now for at home. So I think that we've already seen some of the big tech companies show where they're going to go. So obviously there's more campuses being purchased. There's a lot of the big companies are doubling down on new office space. So there's some companies that, for whatever reason, just have decided that they need everybody co-located in these large centers. I have no idea why. To me, it makes no sense if you can do your work at home. I think, right now the numbers are looking, again, another 6 to 10% of the population is on top of was already. So, they're expecting, I think the numbers are anywhere from 15 to 20 million people in the States are right now planning to move to other locations to take advantage of home-based work. And these are all people that already have jobs. They're emptying out of Silicon Valley and California and New York, but also some of the other large companies are moving their headquarters. So I think we're just going to see a really interesting change in centers in big areas where there's either going to be an out-migration or an in-migration. So, until the dust settles, I'm not sure that anybody will really know, but I would definitely expect it's going to be at least 5 to 10% higher than overall population is going to be working remotely. But it's going to depend on the employer attitudes.
That's Cynthia Spraggs, CEO of Virtira, a company that helps remote teams perform better, best-selling author of How to Work from Home and Actually Get Shit Done. 50 tips for leaders and professionals to work remotely and outperform the office. The website is Virtira.com, Virtira, Virtira.com. Cynthia, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with our listeners or want to promote?
I would say that just because there's a great study everybody should look at if you're in, it's Dingle and Newman study. It talks about the types of jobs that can be done remotely. And I would say just because what I'm hoping for the future is that individuals get to choose their workplace. So just because a job can be done from home doesn't necessarily mean that an individual is geared. But it also means that just because if you have a choice between one or the other, some people are better in the office, some people are better at home. And I'm hoping the world ahead that people will have that flexibility. There's no reason not to anymore. I think we've broken open the bubble on that. So, yeah, but thank you very much for the opportunity and have a great holiday season.
Thank you, Cynthia. Completely agree. And to all our listeners, check out our previous episodes, workfromhomeshow.com. That's workfromhomeshow.com. Email us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, if you just want to say hello@workfromhomeshow.com. And until next time, keep on working from home.